how do you delete duplicates from a database table using a SQL statement. So let's begin by looking at the solution. Now there are a few ways to achieve this, and we'll be looking at the different ways in which we can delete the duplicates. So let's begin by looking at the data. So the data that we're going to be working with is a sample employee data. So I have a table called employee over here. And if you just select the data from the employee table, so I have some sample records, and we can see that there are a few duplicates here on first name and last name. So I have this record Adam Owens, and I again have that record Adam Owens over here. So there are a few duplicates in this table. So to begin, let's see how we can identify these duplicates. So I've also done a video on this earlier, and I'll be putting a link below if you want to see in more detail about how we can do this. But quickly, if you want to identify the duplicates in your database table, the only thing you need to do is group by all the key columns. So for example, in this particular table, we would identify the duplicates if there's any record which has the same first name and last name as any other record. So my key columns here are going to be first name and last name. So what I can do is just group by the first name and the last name columns and take account on that. So I'm going to include the first name and last name in the select statement itself, and then use a group by command on the same column names, first name and last name. So if I just run this query, then what I would get is all the distinct records and the count of those records. So I have some records like the Adam Owens record and the Natasha Lee record, which have a count of 2, which means that there are multiple records with those key values, and therefore there are duplicates in the table. Now to make it a little easier, what we can do is use the having clause. So I can just put having count star greater than 1. And if I execute this query, I'll get only the records for which I have got duplicates in the table. So this is how I can identify the duplicates using the group by and having command. Now what if I need to remove those duplicates? If I need to remove these duplicates, then there has to be some way of identifying these duplicates. And the other thing that I need to do is to identify that which of the duplicate record I want to retain and which record I want to delete. So let's take a look back at the table. So our table is dbo.employee, and let's take a look at the data once again. So if you look at the data, you will see there's something called the employee ID, and then you have the other textual attributes like the first name and last name. So let's order by first name and last name to make it a little easier for us to manually view the duplicates. So now you can see that there are 2 records over here, and they have the same first name, last name, and even the phone and email addresses, but they have distinct employee IDs. So employee ID is mostly going to be an auto-generated ID column, so that would have distinct values. So what I can observe from here is that they have distinct ID values, and when I try to retain one of the duplicates and delete the other, I can base some logic based on the ID column. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to keep the record which has the larger employee ID. So out of these 2, I'm going to keep the record which has the maximum employee ID. So in this case, this is going to be the record which has the employee ID of 5. Looking at the other duplicates, we have this Natasha Lee. So one of them has the employee ID of 3 and the other one has the employee ID of 6. So when I do a max, I should be keeping this record which has the employee ID of 6 and deleting the one which has the employee ID of 3. So let's put this into action. So what I've been talking all along is that I'm going to take a max of employee ID. So if I take a max of employee ID, so this is also and the first name and last name, and this is an aggregate function, so obviously we need to use the group by command as well. So group by first name and last name, and we do not need the order by over here. Just run this command. So you can see over here that these are the records that I'm going to retain. The remaining records I'm going to delete. So for the duplicate records like the Adam Owens, I'm going to keep the record which has the employee ID of 5, and for Natasha Lee as well, I'm going to keep the record which has the max employee ID or the employee ID of 6. So now how do I frame that delete statement? So what I'm going to do is simply use this as a subquery. So I'm going to frame my delete statement on top of this. So delete from the table where employee ID not in, and then I'm going to use this as a subquery. And now if I execute this statement, okay, so we need to remove this first name and last name from here. And now if I execute this statement, you would see that 2 rows were affected, which means they deleted the duplicates. And now if I do just a select star from dpo.employee, I would see the distinct records. So the other duplicate records have been deleted and I can see only the distinct records. So this is one way of deleting the duplicates by using the max, either the max function, you can also use the min function. In terms of the field, if you do not have the ID field, then probably you have something like the last update date or timestamp or time field. So if you have, for example, if it is a transaction data, so you have multiple transactions coming in a day and you only want to retain the latest transaction based on the timestamp, then you can use the max transaction date over here or transaction timestamp over here. So in those scenarios, this would work. But as you can see, this is not a very effective SQL query because for one, we're using the not in command, which is not very efficient. And we're using the subquery, so it is going to have some performance hit. So that's why we are going to now consider the second method of removing the duplicates. Let's look at the other way of deleting the duplicates now. So in this approach, we are going to use the rank or the row number functions, which are analytical functions in SQL language. And we're also going to use another concept of CTE or common table expressions, which are kind of temporary tables, and you might already be familiar with them. So let's see how we can implement this. So first, let's see how the rank or the row number function works. So let's write a select query and again select those columns, first name and last name, based on which we are identifying duplicates. So first name, last name, and now let's use the row number function first. So if you type row, you can see here you get this function row underscore number and then just brackets. And then the way you write this is use the word over and then use brackets and use partition by. So partitioning is basically your grouping. So you're going to do this over your key columns, which are first name and last name. And then you're going to order by. So we are going to order by the employee ID. And then we are going to either select the minimum employee ID or the maximum employee ID. So if you had a timestamp field, you could have used it over here. Order by employee ID as row num and then the table name. So our table is dpo.employee 1. Okay, let's execute this query. So if you execute this query, you'll see that the values in row num for these duplicate records, Adam is 1 record and Adam Owens is 2 records. So this will be more clear if you also take the employee ID and execute this. So you'll see that it has ordered in the ascending order based on the employee ID, and then it has generated a row number for the record which has the less employee ID. The row number is 1, and then in the ascending order it has incremented it by 1. So 1, 2, and similarly for Natasha, you can see for employee ID 3, which was the lower value, the row number is 1, and then you have the row number of 2. So you can change this as well. You can order in the descending manner, and if you order in the descending manner, what would happen is that now the row number 1 would be assigned to the maximum employee ID that you have for that employee. So employee ID 5 is now row number 1. So you can change the direction in which you want to sort, and this is the way you apply that function. Now there's a similar function which is the rank function. There are some differences and we'll cover them in a separate video. But for now, if you use the rank function instead of row number, it would work in a similar manner. So if we use this rank function and execute this SQL query, you would get the same output over here. So what this enables us to do is give us a way to identify the duplicates that we want to delete and the ones that we want to retain. So now based on this rank, I will decide that I want to keep the duplicate or record which has the lower rank, so or the rank of 1, and I want to delete all other duplicate records which have a rank of greater than 1. And I can decide the order, whether I want to order by in the ascending way or in the descending way. And I can decide the field on which I want to order by. So again, taking the example of transactional records, if I want to select a record which has the latest transaction timestamp, I can order by the transaction timestamp in a descending manner, and then decide to keep the records which have the rank of 1. So this is how the rank and row number functions work. And okay, so now let's see how we can use the CTE in our example. So CTE is a common table expression, or it's kind of a temporary table. So how we can create it is by simply writing with and giving it a name. So we have employee data, so employee, and because we are creating a CTE, we are just appending CTE to it. So with, use the keyword with and give a table name. It doesn't need to have a CTE included in it, because just to make it easier to understand, we are just appending the CTE, and then use the keyword as, and then put this query within your brackets. So now you have created a common table expression which has the results of this query. So it has all the data from your employee 1 table, and then it has created a rank or row number, and then it has stored that rank in your table. And now since we have the CTE, we just need to delete the duplicate records. So we are going to write delete statement. So delete from, and this CTE name, which is going to be employee underscore CTE, where, and we're going to identify the duplicates based on the rank. So we want to retain the records which have a rank of 1, and we want to delete all the records which have a rank greater than 1. So all the duplicate records would be deleted, and only the first unique record would be retained. Okay, let's look at the records once again. So we have these records in our table, and we have some duplicates, Adam 1, employee ID 1 and 5, and then we have duplicates on employee ID 3 and 6 over here. And now we have run this query. We have created this query which should be removing the duplicates. So let's execute this query and see how it works. So execute this query, and you can see that there are 2 rows affected, so which should have been the duplicates. And if I go back to my employee 1 table and do a select, I'll be able to see that the duplicate records have been deleted. So these are the 2 approaches in which you can delete duplicates from your database table. I hope that this has been a helpful session, and in the coming sessions we'll be discussing many more scenario-based SQL query interview questions. So stay tuned and have a good day. Goodbye.